I wanted to share one short story to let you know how things work, and it's not necessarily about what I do or did, but I had a phone call when I was the operations deputy for the Marine Corps. It was from a cub reporter from the Wall Street Journal named Tom Ricks. And he was complaining, literally crying on my shoulder. He said, "You all are about to embark and go to Haiti, and I can't get there. And I don't know anything about what the military does, and I want to go with the Marines on board the amphibious ships." I said, "Well, how badly do you want to go?" He said, "I'm ready to leave right now." I said, "Okay, I have only one proviso. If I set this up, you have to stay with the battalion until it comes back." "I can do that. And we promise to get your copy out straight away." He said, "That's a deal. I'll do it." And I called him back 10 minutes later and said, "Okay, here's the officer who's waiting for you. You have a full set of 782 in combat gear, no weapon. And you're cleared to go down there, get on your airplane." And the next thing I heard from him, he was in Haiti. We've been friends ever since, and he did stay the whole time. And if some of you remember that particular, he was even there when the Marine lieutenant was leading some of his platoon in a firefight against a police station there, which was probably one of the only actual firefighting efforts that they did. But Tom has been somewhat enamored of the Corps and has written several things about it ever since then, just because he spent that time. And that was now going on 18 years ago. So time has a way. And this, the reason I share the story is because now more than ever in the all-volunteer era, with the reduction in the sizes of the forces, the stories that the military young folks have to tell have to get out. We have to reach out because journalism, the media, the various avenues are another part of the entire panoply of how the military functions. And that's one of the changes that we've undergone. And there are some more, and we're going to talk about them in the last period today. And to do that, first we have Professor Tom, and if I butcher your last name, am I the 41st or the...
I learned it when I was 14.
Fedyszyn?
Yeah, Fedyszyn.
Did I, Fedyszyn?
Yeah.
I'm doing good, okay. And Tom is a retired captain in the Navy, a surface warfare officer. He has commanded an Aegis cruiser, and I can tell you from having been on several of those, that's a neat deal. He's commanded a guided missile destroyer. And more importantly, as he moved further on in his lifetime, he has taken a larger and larger role in strategic planning in the Navy in two of the most important organizations that advise the Chief of Naval Operations, the senior sailor in the world, on strategic planning, on managing the operational and shipbuilding and the threats that come. And so Tom now is a resident professor at the Naval War College, and he'll tell you more about himself. And secondly, we have Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army, Tad Davis. Now, you guys understand, if you're not going to pay people things, then you have to help them to feel like they're special. And in the Pentagon, we have a unique way of doing that for civilians. We have titles that you will never decipher. Deputy Assistant to the Assistant to the Deputy to the Assistant Secretary of the And the only thing that's really important when you get through with all that is, does he have a parking spot near to the Pentagon, and does he have a window that looks outside on the E-ring, not inside? Those are the defining moments if you live in the Pentagon. And very few folks are lucky enough to have them, and we won't ask Tad if he fits into that.
1 out of 2.
There you go. 1 out of 2, you're batting high cotton right away. And he is also a soldier by background and culture and training. He's commanded a mechanized infantry battalion. He's also got a little Marine green in him because a long time ago when he was very young and bulletproof, he went to the Marine Corps Amphibious Warfare School. So you're in good company. You might not know it, but General Colin Powell is an AWS graduate too. I remind him of that at every opportunity to make sure he remembers us, and he does. He's a West Point graduate, 78, is that right? Okay. And has moved on into the Hoover Institute and other places, so he's probably wildly overeducated like all the rest of these folks that have been up here. I have to say that because trade school is all I've got going for me. Needless to say, what we're going to talk about for the rest of the afternoon is some significant changes in the department itself from Tad and in the way the Navy looks at the world from Tom. And if you guys didn't roll dice to go first, then Tad, you're on.
Okay.
Put my slides up.
Yours are up?
I think so. Go ahead. Yeah, those are my slides.
You want to just flip,
If you can.
change one? You want to just- Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be with you this afternoon. Kind of join Tom here, being the closing two hitters today. One thing I did want to add to the bios, I do have a little bit of Ivy in me because I was one of those guys that went to the Kennedy School here a number of years ago, which was a great experience for me personally. You know, I've been accused by my colleagues back in Washington of using any excuse possible to get out of the building, get out of D.C., and I can assure you that I will use each and every opportunity I can now and in the future. But there's a couple things that happen when you get outside that aura of the Beltway down there in Washington that I think are very important. First and foremost, I think the further you get away from Washington, the cleaner the air is, which is not a bad thing for me being an environmental person. But the second thing, which is probably more important for all of us, is that the farther away you get from Washington, the cleaner your thought process is as well, so, and clearer. So that's not a bad thing. But I think that as I travel around, and I have been on the road about the last 10 days overseas and here in this country, but the motivating thing for me is to get out of the Pentagon as often as I can, to get out with folks like yourselves in academia, but also get out there with our soldiers in the field, because that's where the true work of our Army is done. Not there in the E-ring of the Pentagon, but it's out there, you know, with our soldiers deployed overseas and in this country. And it really is a great opportunity for me to be with you all today to participate in this extremely important forum. You know, as I was flying up here this morning from Washington, I was kind of thinking, you know, reflecting back on some 20 years ago, you know, when I was a student up here, on, you know, what it meant to be Ivy, you know, what it meant to be, you know, part of this Ivy culture, if you will, you know, as a student at this institution. And I, you know, just wrote down a list of things that came to mind. And first of all, it's excellence, you know, being the best there is. When you think of Harvard, I mean, the immediate thought that you have is the top. I had thoughts of leadership. When you look at the tremendous number of presidents that have come from this institution and great military leaders. The vision for the future of our nation and the international community for that respect. Service, something that all of us, you know, learned to appreciate very early on. Service to others, and in many respects, service to the nation as well, is an extremely important trait. Sacrifice, and this concept of service to a higher calling. And so again, as I was flying up here this morning, these are some of the things that I kind of reflected on going back to, you know, 20 some odd years ago, being here on the Charles. The other thing I want to share with you before I kind of go through a few slides here with you is I've got 3 pictures in my office. Well, I got a lot of pictures in my office, but I've got 2 pictures I think that are really important to me that have a linkage here. And these are presidential pictures, one from Theodore Roosevelt and one from John F. Kennedy. And you know, people walk in, they see those pictures up there, they go, hey, you know, what's this all about? We've got, you know, the big stick guy here, and then we've got, you know, President Kennedy over here. And you know, there's a lot of similarities between the two, but there's a lot of differences. And I think that they provide an all-important and necessary balance to us in terms of, you know, the vigor and the, you know, forward-thinking of TR. He led our conservation environmental movement in this country almost a century ago. On the part of JFK, a certain amount of vigor, youthfulness, energy, idealism, and a certain vision for our nation. So I think that those two kind of balance things out very nicely in terms of, you know, how I think we should be, you know, looking to the future. There's also a direct connection here to Cambridge as well, which is not a bad thing. The third kind of picture is not really a picture, but it's a cover of a book by Dr. Seuss called The Lorax. How many of you have heard of the Lorax? Okay, if not, I highly recommend you get out and read it. And the important thing about the Lorax is that he speaks for the trees. Why? Because they can't speak for themselves. And I got that, you know, along the way as well. But again, it's one of those important things that I've tried to incorporate into, you know, what it is that we're trying to do from the department's approach to sustainability and the environmental programs. Okay, let me see if I can master this. effort. I think most of you are familiar with Al Gore's book and other accolades with regard to Inconvenient Truth, and I'm not having much success here. Okay. But with regard to this concept of inconvenient truth, if you go back, and I went through the book again about a week ago in preparation for today's talk, and one of the things that you see in that book is it's about that thick, and about that much of it is what has happened. And so what we're trying to do is to depart from the past and look to the future. In other words, let's not get caught up in this debate in terms of the science of climate change and global warming, but let's look to the future. What are those things that we need to be doing today to prepare ourselves down the road? And so I share with you this quote from Dr. King. I thought it might be fitting that the Reverend gave this speech back in 1967. We are here at the Divinity School. And I thought it might be important to share this with you because it applies not only to what I'm trying to accomplish on behalf of the nation in the environmental and sustainability arena, but as we go around the audience here, and I had a chance to meet with many of you over lunch and during the breaks, you can apply this same concept to what it is that you're trying to achieve as well. But I think what's equally important in this quote is the rest of what Dr. King shares with us, again, with this speech. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, it's a beautiful piece, and I just thought I would share it with you. And again, it picks up where this leaves off with the urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affairs of men does not remain at flood. It ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is adamant to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what I'm going to try to share with you today, this concept of lateness. And I assure you that none of us can be tardy when it comes to the issues that we have at hand, whether it be the issues of bringing ourselves back together through reconciliation here on the banks of the Charles River, or what it's your life's pursuit. You've got to grab it, and you've got to go with it, and we've got to move out as expeditiously as we can. So, again, let me try to get this thing moving here. Okay, wrong way. Okay. There we go. Your Army is on the move, and we've got a lot of things going on out there today and tomorrow and the day after that. We're growing by 75,000 people. We're fighting 2 wars. We're resetting a force which has been conducting combat operations now for almost 7+ years at the tune of about $16 billion each year to reset that equipment. We're modernizing the force. We're resetting the force, and we're transforming the way in which we operate, not only from a business perspective, but also in terms of our combat formations. So there's a lot going on out there. In addition to that, we're executing BRAC 2005, this base realignment and closure effort, and we're redeploying soldiers back from Germany and Korea to the continent of the United States. 1 out of every 3 soldiers, even those in combat, are going to be moving to a new location within the next 2 years. So the Army in itself is on the move. When we look to the global picture, again, as I said up front, I'm not going to sit here and engage in a debate in terms of whether or not the planet's warming or not, but there are certain things that we know are occurring out there. The population is growing. We're consuming many, many more natural resources each and every day, and the quantities of those resources, whatever they might be, are decreasing, and so we have challenges. In some respects, this is just an example of population growth in red that will occur a tremendous way over the next several years, and the crosshatched areas show areas that are going to be scarce in terms of water. When you look at the nexus of these 2 areas, you'll see that in many of those areas are where we've had conflict over the last century, if you will, where we have a lot of conflict today. And so again, there are things that we need to consider from a national security perspective. And this is a quote from our chief, George Casey, who basically lays out some of the important elements of climate change and the elements of national security that go hand in hand with what we're trying to accomplish with regard to our sustainability and our environmental programs. And again, the last sentence there, he talks about some of these challenges that we've got out there. Recently, we issued a report. It's called the Sustainability Report for 2007. We're in the process of getting ready to publish this report for 2008. I got the idea about 2 years ago from corporate America. They publish a sustainability report or a corporate responsibility report about every year. And this is the Fortune 200, I think even the Fortune 500, most of them are doing it now as well. But it talks about what we're accomplishing, what your Army is doing in the field of sustainability. And it talks about the good and the not so good. And I think what's really important here is that we're as transparent as we can, that we share that goodness, but we also share those areas that are not as good, but also lay out for the American people what it is that we're trying to accomplish in terms of correcting, the ills of the past, if you will. And you can see that this got picked up by the New York Times blog, and again, going back to the previous discussion about the media, reaching out, getting the message out. And so I think that when you look at this quote and understand that when you look at the rope slide I had a couple before this one, all those things that are happening out there to the Army, and oh, by the way, fighting 2 wars, but at the same time, we've got the New York Times, acknowledging the fact that we are doing all of those things, but we, the United States Army, are engaged in this third front on climate change, which I think is a pretty powerful quotation. I'll talk a little bit about sustainability as we go through this, but the key for us, and I think the key for us nationwide, is that what we're all about in terms of environmental concerns, climate change, this whole concept of sustainability, and the simplistic view of sustainability, ladies and gentlemen, is simply looking to the future, looking out 25 or 30 years down the road, trying to understand what the impacts of this climate change and what the environmental changes are going to look like, and then backcasting where we are today so that we can then determine getting back to making sure it's not too late to take care of some of these things so that 25 or 30 years down the road, we as a country, in our case, we as an Army, have taken care of those natural resources, have preserved our installations and training areas and other things so that we have a trained and ready force for future generations of Americans, if you will. The other important aspect of this integration effort, this organizing principle concept, is that it can't just be left to the well-meaning environmental people, okay? In other words, if we leave sustainability, if we leave the efforts in the energy arena, green procurement, and other things like that, to the environmental folks, joining hands around a tree over in a corner singing Kumbaya, we're never going to get there, okay? We're just never going to get there. It's got to be embedded. It's got to be ingrained. It's got to be in the mindset of each and every person in this audience, and each and every American, and each and every global citizen out there on spaceship Earth, if you will. And that's what we're trying to do, is to get it out there, get it embedded throughout the entire armies. And I'll get into this in just 1 second. This is kind of what we've pulled together from a conceptual perspective. Can you all see this Venn diagram is kind of our triple bottom line, which focuses on 3 important concepts: mission, the environment, and sustainability. The mission, obviously, we are the military, so we focus on what it takes to accomplish the mission out there, but at the same time to take care of our soldiers, to ensure a good quality of life for them and for their families as well. The environment serves as kind of a bedrock platform for us, if you will. Natural resources, air, water issues, solid hazardous waste issues, things like that are always going to be with us, and those are things that we will take into account as we go through this process. The community is an all-important aspect of this concept for us. It's both the community within the fence line of the military installation, and in many respects we can control that very well. Because I tell people all the time that although we may live in a democracy, we, the military, are not a democracy, okay? Because we tell people, turn off your lights, don't wash your car, don't water your lawn, people do it more times than not. So it is important for us, to be good stewards, of the things that we've been given in terms of energy, water, and other things like that. But ladies and gentlemen, we can work as hard as we can on an installation to have the cleanest air, the cleanest water, the best recycling program possible. But guess what? If the people in the communities that are north, south, east, west, upstream, downwind of us aren't doing their part, then it's all for naught. And I tell people all the time, in Peoria, Illinois, let's say they have the greatest recycling program on the face of the planet. Hey, that's wonderful. All those people in Peoria, Illinois feel very good about what they're doing. But does it mean anything in the greater context of things? No, it doesn't. And so that's why this community thing needs to be not only the military community, but the community outside the installation boundary, and then regional connectivity and national level connectivity as well. But when you consider we've got military installations all over the country doing these sorts of sustainability type programs, we're hoping that this will spread in terms of partnerships with local communities. You see this plus up here. We added that probably about 2 years ago because what I felt was lacking from this model was any kind of economic benefit that could be projected from this effort. And, you know, we've got the green eye-shade people down in the basement of the Pentagon that are counting beans and balancing the budget. And it's really important for folks to understand that we're going to do all these things from an environmental perspective because they're important. They're good. They're looking to the future. But there's also an economic benefit as well. If we can reduce energy consumption through the use of renewables, if we can reduce water consumption by using closed-loop systems that recycle gray water, there's a whole lot of things we can be doing that are good for the bottom line in terms of dollars spent as well, and those are dollars that can be spent wisely elsewhere. So again, in the bottom right-hand corner is kind of where we merge this thing into kind of an external marketing effort of the Army building green, buying green, going green. I think those three elements kind of capture what we're trying to do here, and it's both at our fixed installations, but it's also at our forward operating locations as well in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. In many respects, we're building green starting in 2008. Every building that we build in the United States Army is going to be what we call LEED Silver, and that's a green building. That stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It's the standard, if you will, for energy efficient buildings. And when you consider we're going to spend about $60 billion over the next 5.5 years on new construction, that's huge. In the bottom right-hand corner is a tent over in Kuwait. We're spray foaming these tents. What we found is from our surveys that 80% of the energy being used in these tents for air conditioning was being lost because they're temporary, because they don't have good insulation. So by spray foaming, we can reduce that by 50%. And that's 50% reduction in the fuel consumed, but it's also 50% less of the convoys that have to move forward to bring the fuel to the soldiers that are the ones that are getting hit by IEDs and other ambushes. Less now than before, but again, I think you see where I'm going here in terms of looking at this from both a perspective of operational Army activities, but also looking at it in terms of what we can do back home. Buying green, and again, this is a major phenomenon going out throughout the country, but the concept here is we're a global corporation. We've got tremendous economic throw weight. If we write a contract or a purchasing order for something and we dictate in that order that whatever it is we purchase is going to be a green product, recyclable, reusable. At the end of the day, the supplier's going to take it back and recycle and reuse it. That's huge. The green computers that you see up here, we just made a major purchase of several $100,000 worth of new computers for the Pentagon. These computers use less energy. They have probably almost no hazardous type materials in them. They can be upgraded, and when it comes time at the end of the service period, they can be turned in and used by somebody else. Going green, this shows you we're looking to the future. I mean, we have legacy vehicles with us right now, tanks and Bradleys and helicopters that are on diesel. We're going to have tanks and Bradleys and helicopters 25 years from now. They're going to be on diesel. Even if we go to clean diesel, they're still going to be producing CO2 at the current levels. And so as we look to the future with new technologies, hybrid electric drive, alternative fuel vehicles and things like that, then we think that this will make a tremendous impact on what it is we're trying to do. We have 60,000, look down the right-hand corner here, these non-tactical vehicles, you know, trucks, small sedans, and vehicles we use by our civilians are insulated. We've got 60,000 of those, 40% of them are already converted to alternative fuel vehicles. So again, you can see some of the things we're trying to do. And this just gives you an idea of some of the renewable energy, everything from solar to wind. We are doing geothermal at some of our installations as well. And again, we're at the early stages of this effort right now. This in the middle here, in the bottom right-hand corner, that's our photovoltaic array. It's 2 megawatts out at Fort Carson. And what's interesting is we didn't pay for it. We partnered with a local electricity provider, and he built it on a capped landfill, which couldn't be used for anything else anyway. And it's going to provide energy annually to 500 homes on the installation. Up here in the top, you can see these photovoltaics being placed on homes over in Hawaii. You got 7,000 homes. Again, by putting these photovoltaic arrays on the carports and the rooftops, it's going to provide 30% of the energy needed to operate those homes. And so again, we're trying to integrate all of this together with what it is we're trying to do. But again, it's got to be done, you know, throughout the entire Army, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. Greenhouse gases, obviously a very hot button issue right now in Washington and throughout the country. It's something that has really taken on out west on the western coast out there with California with their AB-32. About 2 years ago, we embarked on an effort to determine what the Army, and we call it the carbon bootprint, to put kind of a military spin on it. Most people, it's a carbon footprint. So we've been working on this effort. We did 2 pilot programs. We've done 10 installations with a proof of concept, and by next month, we will have calculated, at least within the 50 states and territories, what our carbon bootprint will be for the United States Army. We will also look at what we can get credit for from the sequestration standpoint as well. Is anybody telling us to do this? No. Will we be held accountable at some point in time? Probably. I think we're going to be held accountable just like anyone else in the country. We're going to be turned to by the President and others and said, Army, DOD, what can you do? And what I want to do is be postured to be able to say, Mr. President, this is what we can do. We've done our homework. We've figured out what we're producing. We've come up with renewable energy and other strategies to determine how we can do our part. We can also determine how we can't do our part, and it goes back to those legacy vehicles like the tanks and the Bradleys that we're not going to be able to change for 20-something years. But again, getting back to our responsibility to be good citizens and to do our part, we're not out there looking for some sort of exemption from this effort. And again, we want to be in a position to be able to determine our own destiny in the best way we can. This just tells you the way in which greenhouse gases are calculated, and that's probably a whole separate discussion on its own. But again, these are just some of the figures that I would share with you in terms of what we've gone after through our efforts to date in this particular arena. The other thing that impacts on us, getting back to many of the challenges that are out there, is water. And too many times throughout this country we see water as a free commodity, something that's been there, is always going to be there. What this map shows you are all the hot spots, the red and the yellow, are areas of concern. The black dots show you military installations, Army installations that are out there. About 23% of them are in red areas right now. And so we're doing an installation by installation study to determine over the next 30 years what should our concerns be. What's going to be the growth at that military installation? What's going to be the growth of that local community? Because in many respects, the water is coming from the same source. And so we'll look at the water sources there and the watersheds as well to look to the future to see what do we need to do differently than we're doing today so that 30 years from now at Fort Bliss, Texas, out in the middle of the high desert, we have water for the 30,000 soldiers that are going to be stationed there in 5 years. Green Warrior Report. Has anyone heard of this report or seen it yet? Okay, we basically worked with RAND on this report, and this kind of transitions from installation activities, fixed installations, to contingency operations. And I told you up front we wanted to try to make sure that we made this as holistic as possible so there weren't little niches out there that were doing their thing and others that may not be. And so through Green Warrior, this was an effort by RAND to go out and look at case studies, looked at about 111 case studies at 4 deployed operations, mostly in Djibouti, Kuwait, Iraq, and I believe Afghanistan, looking at environmental issues. And they're huge when you consider potential environmental impacts to our soldiers that are out there conducting operations, the impacts to the local citizenry that's out there as well, and also what sort of legacy do we want to leave behind. In other words, when we depart from a location, whether it might be Kosovo, Bosnia, some of the relocations we're doing right now out of Korea and Germany, we want to be good stewards of the environment there too and to leave a legacy behind us as we go. But it does get into some very specific details of considerations for planning of contingency operations, whether it be combat, peacekeeping, peacemaking operations, or humanitarian relief in terms of how we conduct those operations and things that you need to be considering as a planner up front. Again, I commend that book to you if you're interested. We're doing a lot with AFRICOM, and again, with their emerging role as a new headquarters and applying different things. The Zambezi River Basin project is going to be huge in terms of how water is dealt with at 4 countries on the continent. Again, a whole other segment on this. We've done 2 conferences already and workshops with AFRICOM. We'll be doing a 3rd one probably in the fall. So if anybody has an interest in the AFRICOM area, let me know and we'll get you on the list. Finally, we spent some time talking to Tom Friedman and other folks that are out there that are really touching these issues on a day-to-day basis and really asking hard questions And just like Frank did in his talk earlier, really pushing people, pushing the administration in ways that haven't been pushed before. And, but this is out of one of his earlier articles that he wrote. But we have spent a lot of time with him, and I think the world of him. Not on everything, but he does make you think, and I think that's a good thing. So, again, this is what we're trying to do, is to kind of live up to this. And kind of my last slide I wanted to leave you with is really maybe a three-parter, if you will. Part one is this picture that you see here, this United States Army captain in Iraq. And some of you maybe have seen this picture before. But there's been an event that has occurred down the street, bomb blast that went off, and you can see a lot of the folks are starting to move away from the area. But if you notice, there's a young boy, and you may not be able to see it over here, who's standing behind that American soldier. And of all the places that young boy could go to get out of harm's way, where did he go? Behind that United States Army soldier, that trooper. And I think that in itself speaks volumes in terms of the work that we're trying to accomplish each and every day on behalf of this great nation of ours. The second thing I wanted to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, is the quote here from Second Lieutenant Mark Daly. And, you know, it just goes to show, as has been echoed here a couple of times already today at least, that we do have some great young people out there in this Army of ours. And I can't think of a better quote to kind of close this out on than the one from Mark Daly. This was written in his diary in November of 2006. Regrettably, he was killed in an IED in November of January 2007. But that's the kind of young men we have out there and women that are serving in this great armed forces of ours. And kind of my closing thoughts to you as I think about, as I did before on my flight down here, of what it meant to be Ivy, I've kind of also given some thought to what it means to be in our Army. And what are some of those characteristics that are really important? And what are those things that we think about as being soldiers or being part of the Army team? Excellence, being the best. We are the best, and we have the best military in the entire world. We ought to be proud of that. Leadership, demonstrated every day all around the world. Tremendous vision. Service, service to others, and service to this great nation of ours. And finally, sacrifice, that concept of a higher calling. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, Tom, you're on. I get the shortest comments. That's really good.
Thank you, General, and thank you maybe one final time to Roz and Lucas for coming up with the idea for this conference, a fantastic conference. Really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and hope I can add a small bit. I'll be talking about the Navy, and that's our real estate. It's down in Newport, Rhode Island. Those of you who have 90 minutes, go on and drive down. Keith Stokes, our tourist director, would be very upset with me if I didn't put in a plug for Newport. Newport happens to be located in the smallest state in the Union with the longest name. We are actually Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. That's our official name. It's actually a third world nation with a Mediterranean sort of economic infrastructure located geographically in New England, but only geographically. All right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Navy today. You know, first of all, what is the War College? The War College is more or less in that same place that Brian Simmons was talking about, Chaplain School. Newport is the Navy's campus now. So we've got pretty much all of the Navy schools, with the exception of sub-school and flight school. Most of the rest of the Navy schools are there. The War College, both at the senior level as well as at the intermediate level. We will have the supply school, which is a building right now. We've got surface warfare officer school, legal officer school, music school, you name it. All the schools are coming here. So it's kind of where the Navy's educators, pretty much all the Navy's educators, and many of the Navy's trainers also go there. So that's where we are. And I'm going to talk to you about changes in Navy strategy. I've been in the business of Navy strategy for a long time. I helped write a couple of them. I've criticized a lot of them. I think I know most of the whys and wherefores of Navy strategy, and I think it matters that we talk a little bit about it today because the name of this conference really caught my eye. Reconciliation, Ivies, military. And so certainly there's a lot to be said for Navy strategy in terms of reconciliation. Now, I mean, this is how I try to simplify what we've done the last couple days. Reconciliation is a two-way street. The Navy, I'll speak for the Navy should or could or might reconcile with the Ivies. Ditto, the Ivies might or could or should reconcile with the Navy. And so what I would like to do is to spend most of my slides talking to you about the former and then maybe digress for a couple of minutes and talk to you about the latter because I think both are very important. And we sort of do have two conversations going on here. I think the Navy is very, very happy to play ball in terms of what it can do to reconcile with the Ivies. However, I would call this, at best, accidental reconciliation. I mean, it isn't, what can we do to make Harvard happy? That's not what the Navy does. But the Navy does respond to the real world. And what we have here in front of you, that's a copy of the latest maritime strategy, which, by the way, was signed by all the sea services, the senior officer from the Coast Guard, Commandant of the Marine Corps, as well as the Chief of Naval Operations. And it's a very, very interesting document. I've been looking at Navy strategies for about 40 years or so. And of course, we can quibble about this, but my take is that Navy strategies have really only been 3 since about 1970. The first was a very blue water, global, offensive, we will kill the Soviet Navy kind of a strategy in their backyard, thereby helping us win the Third World War, should we ever have one. Hopefully to deter it, because the Soviets would see that they're a definite loser should they do it. And then maybe 20 years ago, we shifted into a littoral warfare kind of a strategy where we talked about what power we could project from the sea to the land. So there was still a blue water element to it, but there was clearly also a little bit of what we would call a green water element to it. What you're seeing today is a strategy that I would argue is a little bit different based on the 2 italicized things that just popped up on the bottom. Navy's forever, the United States Navy, almost forever, has done the top 4. We've sent our ballistic missile submarines to sea, probably the preeminent deterrence force for the United States with its ballistic missiles. They're effectively invulnerable. And anybody who attacks us knows that at the end of the day, the Trident missiles aboard nuclear submarines will get them, so why attack the United States? But forward presence, sea control, and power projection are things that we've been doing in all of our strategies. I'll argue that we'll never stop doing them. That is what great navies do. That's what we've done for a long, long time. We've been the top Navy in the world for a long, long time, and we still do have a huge margin over our closest competitor. This is the top part of what navies do. And it's clearly part of this maritime strategy. I mean, the CNO, or the chiefs of the services don't mince words. They talk about how important it is. But as in all documents, the changes are what matters, not the consistencies. I mean, we've probably said these words since 1939, certainly 1945, we've said these things. What we didn't used to say were the bottom 2 things that you see: maritime security, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief. Everybody speaks in code, of course, and I will try to decode what I'm saying here. And ultimately, what the message is, the new imperatives, the new capabilities of the Navy should be reconciling tools with places like the Ivies. I mean, after all, the sorts of things that we're doing now as a matter of primary interest, not hobbies, not things that we did after we've knocked down the door, but things that we do first and foremost. I would imagine the humanitarians, the humanists, the good people of the world really like these sorts of things, and that is what the Navy now is standing up to do. This is the graphic that we use. I'd like you to look at it for a little while because I'm going to point out the differences. And I call this the double egg strategy. The top egg is that forward presence, major combat operations, we will win the nation's wars. This never goes away. This bottom egg hadn't ever been said before in our maritime strategies, or at least not in any important way. But down there we talk about cooperation. We talk about helping locals. That's what's new. We talk about mission-tailored maritime forces. I'll describe that in a minute. We talk about defense. And these are the sorts of things that our Navy has not historically done. And if anyone in the press cared about this, the press did care about it a little bit. It's about 1.5 years old. And when it came out, everybody picked up on, look at that bottom egg. Wow. The Navy has gotten cooperative. The Navy has gone constructive. The Navy is building things instead of breaking things. It's a whole new Navy. I would imagine that Harvard probably liked that, if anybody at Harvard read it. But the point is that this was a very important message that we were sending to the world. And so if you were to look at the strategy, these would be the main chapters. And that's what opens. Preventing wars is as important as winning wars. That's not what our strategies used to say. We would usually open with, we win wars for a living. You know, let somebody else prevent them. No, I don't mean that. Of course, and of course I'm speaking for myself, not the Department of the Navy or the Naval War College. But in essence, this is what people walked away with. The Navy's all about preventing wars. Maritime security, I don't know if anybody had thought of that before, but maritime security is effectively keeping the international flow of trade moving. Sorry, the laws of gravity still apply. 90% of all the stuff of the world still travels on water. There's no way around it. And so if you want to disrupt trade, you disrupt trade on the oceans. Navies can stop that. The U.S. Navy is all about that. Maintaining the global commons. Promotion of free trade. Partnerships. You've heard the Army certainly engaged in this. All the services are engaged with this. The Navy has all kinds of initiatives going on right now to establish partnerships with other navies. We build navies now for a living. We've got tens of thousands of people out there building third or fourth world navies, navies that can ultimately cooperate with us better. The stronger they are, the more cooperation there will be. The more of what we used to call the 1,000-ship Navy will be out there, which is to say, any Navy who wants to engage in maritime security, maintaining the global commons, fighting those nasty pirates, humanitarian assistance, we can bring you up to step a little bit. You can work with us. We can constructively and cooperatively make the world a better place. And this clearly is the message that is being sent with this new strategy. We can make the world a better place. And therefore, a lot of what you've heard in this conference already applies directly. Provincial reconstruction teams, how can the chaplaincy help? How can social workers help? How can psychologists, anthropologists, basically the helpers out there get on board with the maritime strategy? That's what the strategy is all about. So in the Navy, we take the Chief of Naval Operations seriously. When he says we're doing the strategy, these are the sorts of things we do. We are seriously talking about changing all these things. I won't go into great detail, but suffice it to say, any platforms out there that can do these new things, maritime security, humanitarian assistance, is looked upon with a favored eye. Anybody have any idea who gets the most publicity in the Navy right now? If you were to just read the headlines that the Navy sends out to the world to read, any ideas the ship type that gets the most publicity?
The Comfort.
The Comfort, absolutely, General. Comfort and Mercy. We own 2 hospital ships. Those 2 guys are in the news on every single day. Comfort just making a 4-month deployment down to the Caribbean. I think she got underway a couple days ago. All we're going to do, I'm going to do because I'm kind of geeky and I read this stuff every day, is read about USNS Comfort for the next 4 months, helping poor children in Honduras. And so my guess is that ships that do stuff like that will be favored as we build forces in the future. Where do we go? Well, we're going to go not necessarily where we're going to fight a blue water war. We're going to go where we can protect trade. We're going to go to the Straits of Malacca. We're going to go maybe into the Caribbean for the Panama Canal. This is not places where our battle groups used to go. This is new stuff. Where else might we go? Where are the pirates? Aha! We will have 5, 6, 10 ships in the Gulf of Aden fighting pirates. All this is maintaining the global commons. We are going to go into the Sea of Japan. Why are we going to do that? Because the crazy guy who runs North Korea might be launching a ballistic missile tomorrow, which could threaten Japan, one of our closest allies. And who can knock that ballistic missile out of the sky? U.S. Navy Aegis cruisers can do that. That's what we do. And we've done that 14 out of 16 tries. Far and away the most successful anti-ballistic missile system the U.S. owns. It's the U.S. Navy. And so let me just remind, I just said defense, I said cooperate, I said construct, I said, all these words that weren't part of our parlance before. That's where we're going. Technology, the sorts of technology, if you were an investing person, if I were you, I would invest in systems that help the United States Navy know where every ship in the world is. We call it maritime domain awareness. There's lots of different kinds of systems you can buy in order to get MDA. The United States Navy will invest billions of dollars in MDA. Personnel development, I'll get to that in a minute. Culture, I guess, is probably as big as anything, because when you have been kicking down doors for 200 years and all of a sudden are told to start building houses instead of knocking them down, you have a strategic cultural change that you've got to engage in. Let me just go on for a bit on personnel. Once again, not too much time here, but the sorts of personnel initiatives that we're making are right along the lines of the Ivy League, I would say. Linguists, cultural experts, civil affairs, et cetera, et cetera. That's where we want to go. This is a new cadre that we're building in the United States Navy. Experts in humanitarian disasters and nation building. We're going there too. And also, we're not quite going there yet, but I can see something like this happening. Military security professionals and naval cooperation engagement specialists. In other words, we are engaging in a lot of initiatives in a direction where we've never gone before. And I would say, well, I won't take questions here, but I would like to make one other point, because this is sort of the Navy reconciling itself with the Ivies. But, there's that other thing. How about the other way? And why am I interested in this conference? The name caught my eye immediately just because of what I've been over the last 15 or 20 years. My daughter, Maya, Dartmouth 07, is here to join us. Hi, Maya. Her boyfriend, Andy, Brown 07, is also here. Thanks, Andy. My son was Princeton 97. What do you think we talked about at the table for the last 20 years? Ivies and military. I'm a boat school grad. Sorry about that. But they were raised as Navy juniors. And so, how do we reconcile? I'm firmly convinced that maybe this is that point of strategic inflection that the general talked about before. Maybe now is the time where some of the bad blood has gone away. Maybe because of what I like to call the Second World Depression, for exaggeration, but academics can exaggerate. Maybe now is the time with Harvard losing $12 billion of its endowment that they might be a little bit more interested in government money. No, at the end of the day, we might have a time. This is a perfect conference. If I would have one recommendation for you the next time around is, where's the provost from Harvard? Where are the 50 biology majors? What?
The president was invited and declined.
Okay, well, maybe this is a first step in a 1,000-mile journey. But what I would like to see is kids who might want to join the military, but really hadn't thought about it seriously, and just like to learn a little bit more. To a great extent, we're preaching to the choir here. Lots of gung-ho military people. But bring in the real Harvard community. And I'm not at all pessimistic. I'm optimistic about the future. We've talked about national service. My daughter was in AmeriCorps last year. My other daughter just got in to teach for America. I mean, there's a sense of national service out there. Didn't your leader up at Dartmouth, Jim Wright, just bring in veterans into next year's class? I mean, it isn't that they're looking the other way. I think they're looking for opportunities to buddy up with the military again. And I've heard some pessimism. I've heard some optimism. I'll tend to be Pollyanna on this. But I think that there's more than enough opportunities right now, if we take advantage of them, to play ball with the Ivies, to make them want to. Let me quickly show you this. To make them, if they're all about being CEOs of large corporations, don't be a lawyer inside the Navy. Be a combat pilot inside the Navy. Get into this block right up here, where we spend 90% of our money, but it's a $135 billion operation with 329,000 people looking for leaders. If this is where American leaders are, hopefully fewer of them will become financial engineers, like my son tells me, since there isn't nearly the money in financial engineering as there used to be a year ago, and maybe start doing real things, some of which might be to lead this kind of an organization. So I leave you on that optimistic note. I hope you appreciate the Navy a little bit more, and thank you all very much.